Slade, Dr. Baker, Dr. Randalls. I'm not a doctor.
You would give us Tony and Mo and Monica. How's that?
We're looking for Kenny somewhere.
Kitty, yeah. Reverend Kitty.
Who wants to start out, Kel?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Public comment?
Oh,
Public comment. Is the public here? I see staff, but you're welcome to speak also.
public.
And I see Claire and Dale.
Public.
You're
Yeah.
public.
Proud to be public.
retired.
Probably the most glad to be public.
Do you have any comments to begin with?
I was just going to introduce for some, but I think most people probably know these individuals. We have Claire Van Bredigan. I think that's her name. We're pretty close, okay. And she is with the Grand Rapids Symphony. She is one of the individuals that began this conversation. And of course, everyone knows Dale Hovenkamp, who is currently with Fry Foundation, and he also was a part of the initial conversations. If it's okay with you, we'll start with the 6 questions.
That would be great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
We're here today because Mrs. Slade requested that we answer some questions, and we have 6 questions to go through today. We're going to start with question number 1. The discussion started, I think, about a year and a half ago, around the School of Arts. And the conversation started because of there was concern about funding cuts for the arts education in the state. And also, there was increasing conversation about how do kids have access to high-quality educational alternatives. And then the third part of the conversation was about the Superintendent Neal's vision around revitalization efforts. So we're going to go down the 6 questions and hope to answer them for you.
So the first question that we had was defining the issue, or what is the core problem, what do we hope to accomplish? And as Maida alluded to, part of this was the funding cuts that had directly affected the arts. That was one of the issues. Another issue has access to the arts, making sure that there was equal access, and then also reducing the gap in student achievement. So the academic outcomes connected to this proposal are to increase student achievement, specifically the gaps within Grand Rapids, provide rigorous, relevant, high-quality education, and including equal access to the arts, and develop students through the IB curriculum that are globally minded, compassionate, and risk takers in the communities in which they live and beyond. So quite simply, that was the original scope of our work.
It seems to me it's been more than a year that this has been going on. I don't know that that's particularly relevant, but I think it is sort of factually important that it's been more than a year that this has been.
Over a year and a half?
No, it's been over 2.
Oh, over 2?
Yeah.
I think since I met Claire.
Yeah. Though these many years, but yeah. And I would just like to say, came up in the Finance Committee this morning, just to remind you that some of the partners who have come on board for this project, that we have gone out and had conversations with the arts community, and in addition to the symphony representing music, we've had conversations with St. Cecilia and with Opera Grand Rapids. For visual arts, we've talked with Kendall, UICA, and the Graham. For dance, we've talked with the Grand Rapids Ballet as well as the Hope College Department of Dance. And then theater, we've talked with both Circle Theater and Civic Theater. And then a little bit later on came Grand Valley, who's very much interested in doing the lab school portion of this project. Different than what a typical lab school is, where kids typically would go to a university and have their elementary and secondary education experiences there. Instead, they will be bringing the university into the building and conducting the college coursework in the building. Yep.
Question 2 had to do more into the overview and background, so if Claire wants to go in, and I believe Dale was going to step up as well at this time. And I think we're all here to answer questions at any time as well.
This is not going to be big enough for you. Hang on just a second. So they did talk a little bit about the background, about how we came to be here a couple of years ago, but this really grew on the model, on a couple of programs that were already in place and are already in place within the district. Certainly the model at City High School with their IB program was a great inspiration, but definitely how they layered economic ecology on top of IB to enhance that learning experience is a big inspiration for this project. And certainly the funding model then also plays into that with external support from the Wege Foundation and their support of that project and those initiatives. And so that really is where we started, and then we saw that when the instrumental music was consolidated in city as the hub, what the possibilities would be if you had a really intensive music program all housed in one building. Certainly the visual arts that were there as well, the benefits that then play into that. Certainly arts is considered to be a core of IB, so IB is already well aware of that. The length that we're talking about going with this project, though, is not a part of IB. The intensity of the arts piece is really more about the development of what we're calling non-cognitive skills. So some of those self-discipline things that we know will lead to a greater student success, we think are more easily adapted and explored through the arts curriculum, and so that's part of what's coming into this. So this isn't strictly an arts, a school of the arts like you will see in most communities. The school of the arts that exist in most communities are about creating advanced learning opportunities for kids to become professional artists, and that is not the purpose of this program. The purpose of this program is really much more about developing non-cognitive skills alongside the cognitive development, which is already in place through your MEP testing and things like that, if that makes sense. I'm still learning a lot about that in my own, on my own, so that's what I know so far, yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that there was a lot of conversation around 2 years ago is, should this be a middle school or a high school? Should we start with a high school component? And we really looked at doing something that was very sequential, something that had an international focus with some pretty rigorous international standards, knowing then that you want to build on that. And we looked at these different models, and what was real appealing was that first part of IB where it's you learn how to learn. How do I, as the individual student, learn to learn? So again, more of that non-cognitive approach. So when you move into this middle years process, kids really can do some more intensive projects, and when you move into the final 2 years, the actual diploma piece, you're really taking it to the next level, getting kids ready for the university. And that's what we think is a really significant program for Grand Rapids, knowing that these kids can do this.
And building on the other end by adding that component for 3- and 4-year-olds to really jumpstart that educational piece and get them started early. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here that we need to bring out. I know you've gotten this document with most of this, so I don't. Are there any questions specifically about this area that we can help answer? Some of the challenges that we foresee, building leadership being one of the key ones, and so that's about identifying and engaging, building leadership that shares the vision of this project and is fully supports and is trained in the IB model. That's, along with the arts, that's going to be a critical component to have that person in place and identified. Certainly staffing, and making sure that we have, again, staff that is well qualified. I think that's probably going to involve some dual certification, as well as some personal background in the arts is going to be a critical component. There are likely going to be some contractual issues that will need to be addressed. Certainly, one of the key components of this program is the amount of collaboration. IB really requires a high level of collaboration, and certainly if we're talking about doing an arts infusion, that is going to require in and of itself a high degree of collaboration. So ensuring that there's enough adequate staff time, not only to develop what that collaboration looks like, but to continue and spur that growth of that collaboration, and then also to allow sufficient time for implementation of formative assessments of students, so that the teachers have time to review that information and really put it into place, so that they can really make use of that. So we're not evaluating kids at the end of the semester for tasks that should have happened in week 3 and trying to get them caught up at that point.
And
So
then
it's-
again, to tie in with a lab school piece, obviously you would want some time where those two entities, those two institutions, the secondary, or I should say GRPS and Grand Valley have chances to talk to each other. So you've got to have this built-in kind of collaboration time. Because the whole thought behind this is remediation is taken out. So it's not, you can't, it's what will you become. It becomes very much where learning is celebrated. And I think that's a really critical shift. So it's not a culture of shame.
So, you know, we're certainly delighted by the amount of support and interest that the board has taken on, and certainly Carolyn and everybody at the administrative level has really dedicated a lot of time since the end of June, which is just an amazingly busy time for them anyway, but then to take this on in addition has really been wonderful, and they've really done a lot of great work. So to continue that, to make sure, how does this have longevity beyond all of us that are sitting at the table now? How do we ensure that those coming after us feel similarly about this project and make sure that it remains a priority is a concern. And then I would say, you know, that we're really trying to be strategic in the decisions and the recommendations that are in this proposal. And that goes as far as including trend data and market analysis to define our enrollment process and many other decisions and key decisions that we're making.
How do you, just going back to the top, how do you feel about the pool of leaders that we have either currently in GRPS or at least nearby for both staffing and the leadership?
I don't know. I personally don't know because I don't really run in those circles tremendously. I think, you know, it's going to be critical to develop a job description that matches what the expectations are. And then I know that the arts community would very much like to be a part of that process, that interview process. And I think due to the level of collaboration that would be potentially.
Talking about teaching staff or leadership?
For both.
That's why you really have to like her, you know, she tells you exactly.
It is really encouraging though, because there's like, I think there were 15 people that have really put this 15-page document together, and it really represents every branch of the district here. And people have been really very excited about it and haven't had the learning curve that Claire and I have. You know, I've struggled with this for 6 years, Claire for 2. Other folks came in June and really, I think, have jumped in and see the value of that.
I would
encouraging.
and I would expect that there would be people within West Michigan, certainly, that would be appropriate candidates for this. And I think that knowing, having been to an IB training session to talk with other IB educators, there is a network of IB educators where they really are looking for projects that speak to them passionately, and so they will often see international candidates for teaching positions at IB school. So I wouldn't be surprised to see similar sorts of things.
And Dr. Baker, it's really about learning. And,
Yeah.
and learning doesn't stop when you're 18 or 22 or whatever. It's an ongoing process. So do staff come in with this interest to look at what's best for students and how can we do it differently? And then I think you're ready to go.
Well, that was my thinking, that it wouldn't be difficult. It wouldn't be difficult to get this. Carolyn, you wanna?
No, I was just waiting for you to finish up. I am still trying to keep us with the 6 questions.
Okay, all right.
So,
Okay.
I just wanted
So
to make
you-
sure
so
that
anyway,
folks knew
okay.
that it was time to go to them.
So I'll have a question in preschool, but I'll wait until we get to that section, because I think you have that next under recommendations.
Under recommendations, we weren't sure that we approached this section in the manner that you would want, but we are willing to answer any questions that come up. We tried to, under recommendations, give you the features of the program that we are recommending in connection to this concept. So under recommendations, we'll have someone speak to first the introduction and then pre-primary years, middle years, diploma years. Lab school, our representative from Grand Valley wasn't able to make it today. Foreign language, and then the after-school program.
And I'm sure special ed is in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's implied.
Teresita,
It's in the larger proposal, yes.
thank you.
So we'll have you start us again.
Yep. So as we've sort of mentioned before, this is an IB School of the Arts. We're proposing to start with 3-year-olds through 5th grade in the first year and to expand up a grade every year as those kids advanced. And I think we just figured out that the first graduating class would be 2021. And that similar to the program that's in place at City, that the arts would be embedded into every aspect of the curriculum, similar to economicology at City.
We, as a part of the arts programming, we hope to include music, dance, theater, and visual arts. And as Claire commented earlier, it is about the cognitive development. However, our goal is also to develop masters in the area of arts. We hope that as a result of our programming, we'll get to display the many talents of a lot of our children. We acknowledge upfront that expectations are high. It's a very rigorous day. It's an after-school program. There's 6 to 7 years of foreign language, on and on and on. Expectations are high. And there is a parental involvement component where we expect that our parents will commit to expectations in support of the academic goals of the program. So without any further delay, we'll start with Joanne Kelty, who will talk to us about the pre-primary years, and then Dr. Gunno, middle years, and then we have a diploma years program in our district at the center.
Thank you.
Won't spend a lot of time there.
Here's where those glasses come in handy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, for today's purposes, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview. I know some of you know probably as much as I did, attended this session in June, but we'll kind of go over that and talk specifically about the IB Primary Years Program, referred to as the PYP. I know you needed one more acronym to learn. The IB PYP program is designed for children 3 to 12. Its objective is to prepare students to be active participants in a lifelong journey of learning. It's a curriculum that's constructivist in nature, which means that learners are actively constructing meaning and building on their background knowledge and experience and reflecting on those experiences to build new knowledge. It reinforces the idea that the development of understanding requires the learner to be actively involved in making meaning, which is particularly my way. I mean, preschoolers learn that way, all children learn that way, but I think sometimes we forget that as children enter elementary school. So basically, it's highlighting the way the brain learns best. Its curriculum is centered on 6 transdisciplinary themes, which are who we are, where we are in the place and time, how we express ourselves, how the world works, how we organize ourselves, and the sharing of our planet. Those disciplinary themes help teachers develop programs of inquiry, in-depth investigations. And what you had in front of you is a sample of one of the programs of inquiry starting. I didn't copy all the years, so I just wanted to give you a one-pager to see some idea of how that would proceed from 3 years old on, and it goes up through elementary, up through 5th grade. So as I mentioned, these inquiries are substantial, in-depth, and usually last for several weeks. So we're really talking about the rigor of a curriculum, more depth rather than just across the top. And developing these inquiries, obviously, teachers have to incorporate our grade level content expectations, which will, be become Common Core standards and figure out how all that fits into, those the inquiries. They also would look then, as you can see through, there'd be vertical and horizontal alignment, so they would look from grade to grade, age level to age level, providing that, the continuum of instruction. Obviously, as in all curriculum assessment's an important part, and it is formative and summative in nature, and it enhances learning and provides opportunities for students to reflect on what they know, show what they can and understand, what they can do and what they understand. Another important piece is the teacher feedback to the students that provides the guidance and the tools and the incentive for them to become more confident, more skillful, and better at understanding how they learn. I think one of the things that was really outstanding in this was that children who complete this program are very self-assured. They know how they learn. They can talk to you about that, and obviously are excited about learning because they know what they need to do. And because these inquiries would contain all of the Common Core grade level content expectations, obviously all the assessments that would traditionally be used in our other schools would also be applicable to IB students. And then in addition to that, as Claire had mentioned, assessments within the units of inquiry so that we know right off whether a student is catching the concept or the big idea that's in the unit of inquiry. I think the thing that I've found most interesting in the investigation I've been able to do about this so far is that it really incorporates all the elements of the principles of learning from the IFL that we've been talking about for the last 5 years. It really
Refreshing.
Takes that and puts it into one coherent package. So I think that's good to know that it's really, really good education and certainly complements all the things that have been going on and we've been learning in the last few years. So I don't know if you have any questions.
I have one. I'm reassured to hear that it's complementary to what we've been doing, so that we're not always going off in new directions.
new
We get really
initiative.
tired of that kind of a thing. In looking at the length of the day, given classroom time, after-school activities, is that too long a day for preschoolers, or what's your
We had talked
suggestion
about
on
the
that?
preschoolers probably, because of all the licensing regulations, wouldn't participate in that necessarily in all the after-school pieces. We would have to look carefully at the time, because the adult-to-child ratio is so different in preschool.
But it's not uncommon. The very successful preschool program at CC, at the community college, has programming that goes until 6 o'clock. So this would be on par with those sorts of experiences.
But there's a lot more to be done with the preschool component of that. Is that what I'm getting from your statement?
Well, I don't think we've flushed out every detail
Okay.
of how it would work. We certainly, I think the important part that differentiates this from others is that it begins at 3 and continues on. All the details of how the day would work and how the infusion of the arts may work may be a little bit different for preschool.
Okay.
If people are using preschool, like many of us did when we had preschoolers, as somewhat childcare, then, I mean, after-school care, there are different rules in regard to. I would imagine that it wouldn't be too terrible to have, preschoolers are in somewhere besides under the care of their family, and that certainly could work still. It's 8 to 6.
So you'll have to be
is-
Structure,
looking
but
at all
there are-
that.
Right.
There are lots of programs, quality programs, that go from 6 in the morning to
Sure.
6 at night. I
Yeah.
was director of programs similar to that for years.
Good point.
Anybody else? Oh, I did want to comment a little bit, and I agree that this whole, what initiative has it been over the last 5 years that has been complementary? You were saying,
The Institute for Learning.
okay, that's, I just wanted to
The-
clarify that
their
piece about it.
expectations, all
Yep.
those things are
Yep.
encompassed within.
I was
this IB
assuming that
program.
was what it was, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. All right. Those middle school years.
Which is a
Oh,
big middle school years.
Yes,
The middle
the
years
middle
program is
school
not a
years.
tiny, yeah.
And this is the
Middle years.
MYP curriculum. The middle years we're talking about grades 6 through 10. And it provides connections between traditional subjects and the world for students to become critical thinkers. What stands out for me in this piece is the connection, the world connection, and the integration of subjects and the arts. So that students would, because there's IB programs all over the world, students not only get to do project-based projects, learning in the city of Grand Rapids, but also connect with other IB students around the world. So it gives them a different perspective from different cultures around the world. And because of the integration of the 5 areas, it brings rigor into the classroom, rigor along with the projects, project-based learning. And we know that research shows that kids, we all learn better when we're actively engaged and through projects. One other thing I wanted to point out is that currently at City Middle High School, they have an IB program, and the students there have gone to Costa Rica. They have worked with other students around the world, including Costa Rica, and recently they went to Vancouver. Students went to Vancouver, and from there they decided that they were going to work on an environmental project, and they've asked Kent Hills Elementary to be a part of that. So Kent Hills is not an IB school, but they're partnering with City in a project-based learning piece that's environmentally themed. So the MYP program, curriculum, not program, curriculum, builds a community of world learners. So it's not just a community of learners here in Grand Rapids, but a community of learners. They have connections to the whole world.
Yeah, we had some of those students from the IB program at City do a presentation to the board when they went to Costa Rica.
Right, that's right.
One piece I don't want to neglect, I don't want to leave out, is that kids start the foreign language piece in middle school. So they would have 6 years of a foreign language, plus, of course, their own mother tongue, which is English. So, and for an ELL learner, it could possibly be 3 languages, because I would have my own, I would have English, and maybe a 3rd language.
Yeah.
Just to summarize, at the pre-primary years, in the program, the pre-primary years, students are gaining deep conceptual knowledge. It's not unusual to see a lot of hands-on work. And not only do they gain deep conceptual knowledge, the goal is to have kids gain it through building their own knowledge using a constructivist approach, but also to integrate that knowledge, as Joanne mentioned earlier. When they get to the middle years program, a huge difference, I think, takes place in our programming, and that is the connection of the child's conceptual knowledge, himself, and the world. It is at that point where there is a deliberate attempt to ensure that students know that they are part of a larger community, and that community is a global community. We know that the world is getting a lot smaller, and tolerance and understanding of communities across the world. Not only that, we know that there aren't any real problems that don't have a global impact. So if students begin to learn very early on that they have the ability to impact the world, we think that's an important characteristic for our students to leave us with. The last phase of the programming has to do with the DP programming, and it is, in fact, the last 2 years of the IB program. It is at this point that students bring all of that learning to bear. We see them as being more independent learners. As Dr. Gunnell shared with us, some of our students participated in a learning experience just a few weeks ago. And then they came back and they began to develop projects across the city. They also engage in deep research. They study deeply as well as broadly. Their final exams and their projects are presented across the world for evaluation and feedback. And then a final portion of that is their contributions to the broader society through project-based expectations that take place within the community, our local community or community abroad, where they are out volunteering. They are bringing to bear some of the work that they have been engaged in during their past years, and they're bringing all of that to bear in sort of a capstone opportunity. There are exams. The exams are criterion referenced exams, and they are internationally standardized standards that they are addressing. It's a rigorous program. We have been very intentional about putting descriptions around our special ed programming in place, because we don't want to make it a program that is for some children and not others. When you look into our proposal, you'll see that there are some general characteristics around special ed, and we left it that way deliberately because we believe that if this is going to be a cutting-edge program, and we believe that it should be, we don't think we should at all recreate what we have. If it's going to be cutting-edge, we need to be clear about our outcomes for special ed children and the strategies that we're going to employ for support.
Great. Pleased to hear that.
So I have another question, or the core, Common Core standards, you're fairly familiar with them, Carolyn, right? That I've heard from a teacher who also has a child at City, 11th grader, that the presentations she's been receiving regarding the Common Core at Lowell, where she teaches middle school, have sort of reinforced a lot of what the IB is driving at, and same with Montessori, because we both have a Montessori background. Do you find that to be true?
I find that to be true, and to be honest, I like to study the exams. I believe that they are going to be confronted with more rigor. We just purchased as an example, a math text for the IB program at City. Now, I know that all children won't engage in that particular class, but it is very rigorous. And I think sometimes we don't, our curriculum is so full that sometimes we don't have the time to engage in the depth of learning. But what we see coming in Common Core is very much like the IB. I just think that probably it is a bit more rigorous.
Yeah.
IB, the Common Core requires a lot of explanation, not just solving a problem, but understanding how you solved it. I think you would see that start in the primary years with the IB programming.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Do you want me to fill in about the lab school? So Grand Valley has been very invested in working with us a lot about the lab school concept, and I mentioned a little bit before, their view is that they would like to see their Ed 180 class, which is their Introduction to Education courses, be taught in this space. And as a part of that course, their students have to complete 25 hours of volunteer time. And so they become a resource, an additional adult resource in the building to use for classroom remediation, but they'll also be participating in the after-school program, providing the tutoring section of that. And where they felt it was appropriate and where students met the criterion, there would be an opportunity for those Grand Valley students to get their credentials to be substitute teacher in this building, so that there would be a continuity of learning instruction, so that you wouldn't have to necessarily bring in a person from the outside who had no understanding of the curriculum or what's going on. You could actually sub in a person who had some familiarity with the kids and with the program to continue that learning, and you wouldn't have a lost day of instruction.
along with certified teachers.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Emphasize that.
Oh, no, yeah, we're not doing anything without them. Yeah, absolutely. So they're very excited. They think that there are a lot of resources that they can provide and support to not only the students in the building, but the staff and the parents and families to just get everybody kind of really excited and going in the right direction.
How far along is this going through a vetting process for Grand Valley, or is this a go, or where are they with that?
I'm not 100% sure what their process is. Their Ed 180 course is already in existence. My understanding is that the dean of the college is fully informed of where we are in this process and is giving it her full support. In addition to the lab school, of course, they're also seeking certification from IB to serve as a training facility, which will have significant impact for us because then that cuts down on a huge cost for professional development. But that's independent of whether or not this project goes anywhere. So this becomes a real resource for them as well to train their students in IB instruction and get them placed in a school where they can practice.
So they're really looking at three things, Mo. So the first thing is the lab school, and Dr. Collins has been really committed to that. I think as this gets full approval here, there will be some more meat on the bones for that piece of it. The next is then that regional training center, which has a huge financial implication, not only for this project, but for anyone that's offering IB, because the incidentals are taken out of it. And then the other thing is that they're planning on doing is offering a master's in IB. So, and I think they're one of how many?
5, I think.
In the
5
United States.
Any questions about that component?
We kind of mentioned foreign language once before. The international assessments, we've also mentioned. There are internal assessments. We were just out kind of morphing those last week, as a matter of fact, but there are also external assessments that are criterion reference, and they are the program's way of ensuring consistency across the world, where students' progress is gauged against other students internationally. And then the after-school program, we put quite a bit of detail in the proposal about the after-school program. We tried to give an example of what it could look like, and with the understanding that we know that funding and many other circumstances could shape what the after-school program actually carried out in the final analysis. We did want to make sure that it is mentioned because we see that as an important feature and an opportunity to extend the learning that takes place for students during the school day.
And there's some great research coming back on some really innovative models for after-school arts programming. El Sistema being the music one that I'm, of course, most familiar with, which is gaining international recognition for the work that they're doing in Venezuela, and the model that they're using, and that certainly would be something that we would be looking at to see how best to incorporate some of those practices. And I know that the arts groups from the various disciplines are looking at those best practices from their own areas to incorporate that into the after-school model.
Implications, and we have Dave Vanderwall and Ken Cloncairns who will address this portion.
Money guys. Here comes the dollars and cents.
The meat and potatoes. You can
Always
shoot.
comes down to that, doesn't it?
Do you care which budget goes first?
Up to you.
I'll take the capital first. This budget was developed based on the direction that Claire and Gail provided us as far as what they would like to see in the building, their vision. So you'll see that there's a range. The vision also included the total program would encompass a building the size of one of our high schools. So we use that as a basis. The vision also included a fully modern, state-of-the-art facility. So we broke it down into two parts. One, building expectations to address the modern state-of-the-art facility, basing that on renovation costs for a building of that size. And then the second part was the program specifics for the IB, and not only the auditorium, but specific rehearsal classrooms for the theater and the various parts. That's what went into this. Because we did not identify a specific building, we left it as a range, trying to accommodate any future selected site, or giving us enough flexibility to adapt.
Looking at an existing site, correct?
In this estimate, yes.
Do you want to highlight anything, or you just want to deal with questions? Other than the bottom line, and what it does to you?
Well, this is,
If you look at that. We're looking at.
well, what's the, I guess because obviously this is big, but, what is does it have to be this big, or, I mean, is there a way that, we could,
We just kind of, we had this question this morning, as you can imagine, in the Finance Committee, and so.
I mean, I hate to say we can do this as soon as we have this much money.
Right, right. And I think that what we're planning on doing for both the capital as well as the operating expenses is to go back and say, if we roll the program out in this way, this is what the minimum requirement would be. If we roll capital improvements out over several years, this is what that might look like. So putting together some of those, yes, the total project is probably going to look like that, but what is maybe a year by year going to need, or, if the program comes in slightly smaller, we just kind of shot down the middle and said, well, if we had this many classrooms of this many grade levels, this is what it would look like, just to start the conversation. We know that there are a lot of
Would we be looking at a capital campaign of some type?
Well, I think that there's any number of ways that the financials are going to be handled. We don't expect this to come out of the FTE. I mean, you can't fund what you're doing now out of that. So when we started having conversations initially with people, with local philanthropies about what the school might look like, a couple of recommendations came in that we should consider looking at a funders council. So pool those resources and get an advisory panel together that would help look at this financial side of it. And I think that that is exactly what our intent is to pull some of those community resources to talk about it, but then I think that there are also some national foundations, like the Wallace Foundation, the Gates Foundation, all of those guys who are typically looking at national impact for their grants. I think that if we can use this as a pilot program to talk about how to influence urban education, arts education, there's any number of angles that I think will appeal to those guys. Teacher evaluation, education reform, I mean, you name it. So how do we tap into some of those resources as well to provide some assistance? What is our long-term sustainability plan? What are some models that are working? I know Dr. Falb this morning talked about how do we look at charter schools and see how they're funding things above and beyond the FTE. How are colleges and universities doing that? Because their program is sort of similar. They get a cut amount from the state, and yes, some comes in from tuition, but they're also using other sources as well. So how do we maximize those resources to provide that financial stability?
The funding model, again, is going to have a strong collaborative approach.
Very.
So as much as this is a transformational model, I think the funding is going to have to be as radically different too. So if you think this is what has to happen with students in this community to be a state-of-the-art teaching organization, how do we fund this model?
And that speaks to a timeline. You've got a timeline of next year. Is that doable, given the funding efforts that are going to happen? I mean, you're talking about
It's possible.
some big money to do.
Is the window closed? No, the window is not closed. We've got about 1.5 inches of room. We don't have a lot of time to do a whole lot of, well, I want to look at this. We don't have a lot of time for that anymore. I think that we have to have proposals in people's hands for some portion of this by November, so that they can make a decision, so we can understand that we've got money in hand to move it forward and start getting people hired and trained so that a building could open in 13.
Well, to that end, that's what I was thinking also, Dale, you with Wiggy's Foundation now, I believe they said, or you?
Fry.
Well, I think the Fry and what
Oh,
Carolyn
Fry.
referred to as the Fry and the Wagyu Foundation have funded this exploration piece right now.
And I know Mr. Weggie has been very instrumental in helping move this forward, so I'm wondering, have there been any financial commitments from any of those individuals, or?
Not other than for the feasibility study that we just are concluding.
And no
Pushing
one's
it
been
at the time.
asked.
Yeah.
See, the other thing,
Yeah.
no one's been asked.
No,
Okay. So,
intentionally,
Yeah,
because we wanted to
right.
make sure that everybody knew what we were asking of them before we started doing that.
And we've just come from discussion about the Grand Rapids Community Foundation and their feasibility and so on with continuation of the Harrison Challenge Scholar Program. And, that's a huge thing, and that's hitting the same funders that are local. Not speaking to the national ones, but to the local ones, that's a big capital campaign going on right now, too. That's in my mind, having just heard that.
Yep.
Well, I'd love to see this happen. It's just,
would too.
if you
Wonderful.
talking about getting it in the hands, I mean, I think that two levels that, there are certainly many communities surrounding that have pretty state-of-the-art performance facilities, and it's just performance facilities. It's not a program like this. And so this community ought to really invest in that. At the same time, we moved into, city is in a building that was moved into, it wasn't a state-of-the-art brand-new facility when you moved in there, Dale, and it's still a pretty good school, so,
Right.
and it's still the top in the state, and so I think so I'm thinking about, a short-term and a long-term is that, if we had to move into something that wasn't, state-of-the-art next year, but we were able to make sure that the facility got made, because, again, I mean, that program stacks against, any high school in the country, and it certainly isn't described as state-of-the-art,
Right.
so.
And Dr. Baker, I think you're absolutely right, because if we wait where it's all perfect, we're gonna be putting this off another 10, 12 years. We can't afford to do
Can't
that.
do that.
We cannot miss
Right.
any more time with these kids.
No, we got to do it.
And I think it's, you didn't speak to this, but I'd like you to speak a little bit to your recruitment and the population that you're looking at, because, and what, it's a test, it's not a test-in program. I think that's important for anybody hearing this today or whatever, because we're not just talking about the top performing, academically performing students. We're talking about a good range of representing Grand Rapids Public Schools, the city of Grand Rapids, and that population. And if you want to add anything, because I think that's a very important message, that it isn't just for the top scholars. This is an
No, yeah.
opportunity for all kids to be involved in this kind
And
of thing.
hence, you have the primary years program coming in. So it's not about testing kids to get
Right.
in. It's about making sure that kids have the skill set to do that kind of work in the 11th, 12th grade.
Right.
Because I think we all believe they can. We have to give them the tools to do that. So
Yeah, I
it's
think
not
that's-
being
I think that's
exclusive.
excellent.
Do you guys have any of that trend and data information in regard to
It's-
interests or?
Well, yeah, yes and no.
Okay,
We have done an initial study with the help of Link. They
Right.
surveyed 300 families and got responses on that, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. There were very few people that didn't feel supportive of the idea, of the concepts that this project would bring around. So as far as in a market analysis, I feel really comfortable in moving this project forward, that the things that we were planning on offering are going to be highly desirable.
I would just like to say, Dr. Randall's, Susan is in the audience. She has been working with CRI to collect additional information.
oh, okay, sure,
That was the no part.
We
We're still
are,
working on it.
Yeah.
Looking at our trend data across the city, not only for Grand Rapids students, but students outside of the district. And part of that will be some of the future study that we engage in. We wanted to make sure that we knew where the students are and if they're, and get a sense of their interests, that kind of thing. But there are current studies that continue through her office.
okay, good, yeah. The other piece I wanted to just dovetail was that while there is a focus on primary years and growing our own student population, we did have that study of a very, Grand Rapids Public School, inner city school have just a DP program, and kids the expectation was, you're at Union, and now you're in Union DP, 11th grade, and kids actually thrived and did well. So without a lot of build-up for this, and they still, you know, it's that whole thing, raise the bar, and kids do get there. So I think it's really exciting to have more and more programming regard that.
You've done a tremendous amount of work on this. And it sounds like everybody's had some input and some questions and issues about, obviously you've got contract issues, money issues, and those kind of issues. But it's an exciting idea, and I really am pleased that it would be open, so it's not just an elite program at all.
There's
Very
another
helpful.
money. So,
Yeah,
got the other money.
it's just money. Yeah, do you want to talk about the operation money?
Have we got to that one yet?
No, the policy and contractual implications.
Oh, are we at that one?
No, but I didn't know if you were wrapping it up or not, I didn't.
No, I'm not ready.
Oh, good, okay.
We still have time.
Well, I know it, but you did sort of.
Any other questions?
Again,
Budget, do we need to go to anything with budget?
Is
Ask any
there
questions?
sort of
You've got two in here.
bare bones building,
Is this a building?
the ultra minimum? Do we have the ultra minimum if we just moved in somewhere and
Just take a minute and
practiced?
talk about that a
Minimum
little
and a
bit.
maximum.
I'll give you the 3-minute short version. We took the program, as it's outlined in the proposal, looking at the numbers of classrooms, sessions, sections, the 3-year-old and 4-year-old preschool, and began to put staff and cost to that, using our traditional student ratio numbers, looking at actual GRPS average salary costs, looking at our actual benefit tables for the types of positions that we have, and then setting some parameters going forward out quite a few years. That's where that big long sheet comes in. And then seeing what does that look like when we apply the state funding sources that we have. And as has been discussed already, it would be needed for a program like this, which is rigorous and goes beyond the norm, where there would be collaboration with other providers of funds and long-term commitment if this were to come about. But anyway, the staff ratios are based on GRPS average student ratios to teachers, and the salaries and benefits for those positions are applied. We've made allowances for classroom supplies, materials, professional development allowances. IB has some specialized costs and mandated PD and the like, and a series of different types of fees that are built into the program. We also realize that there's a lot of administrative background kind of support, and that's where you see the line for the unrestricted indirect costs. That's the maximum rate that the state would say we could apply to direct instructional program costs to cover things like payroll, to cover part of my salary in the business office, to cover curriculum development, that type of thing. That's all in the background, the superintendent's office, all of those areas. And so that's added into it. We've applied a state foundation grant to the enrollment numbers that have been estimated. We've been conservative, I think, with what we've applied there. We've had no increase in state aid per pupil for 6 or 7 years, and then a modest 1% after that. That's applied using the blended count that we're currently under. Also, it's important to note that the preschool 3-year-old and 4-year-old programs do not generate state aid, and so therein lies some of the added cost of the program. There are also some non-traditional positions like the IB coordinator and the like that you wouldn't see traditionally in any of our buildings. So we wanted to see what this type of program would look like fitting in our normal funding parameters, and there's a gap. And so that requires some thought about how do we collaborate with others, how do we make up those differences, I understand traditionally, some of the foundations like to give seed money, but not fund operational costs over a long period of time. However, I think in a program like this, we may need to look at a different model and talk with those supporters about that. Whether they're in for the long haul and willing to partner with us to make something like this happen. So this, I think, is a fair and conservative look at some of the costs without that added support. And so I'd welcome any questions that you have.
What number did you use for the average student numbers?
Student numbers were, there was an enrollment projection done. I don't know if
It's,
that,
yeah, it's in your big packet.
Contractual.
Around in the 40s, I think.
So
Right.
when you looked at grades K-5 teachers to determine, what are you using for class size?
class size for the K-5, in the K area, it is 22 to 1. Grades 1 through 4, it ranges from 25 to 26 to 1. And then it moves into the middle school years at 28 to 1, and then in the high school time period, it's 34 to 36 to 1.
Were you using the average?
We're using the averages, yes. And then we've built in with the provision of some of the special staff members that you see there, enough time so that there's prep time allowed for our teachers under current contractual language. But, contract is something that's an issue that, needs to be talked about, I think, as far as the program is concerned. It would be, yes.
Have we done any work with that at all?
So how many students would presumably have this is based on this 547 student?
It starts out, including the preschool, with 692 students, of which, when taking
Oh,
out.
the 547 is the, okay.
Yes, when you start blending with a 90-10 ratio, we're using the student blended number to apply state aid.
So it looks like about half of the deficit is from preschool because of the lack of, but if there were other sources of funding.
So
for
much national
preschool,
attention on early childhood
So I think
education at this
that's,
point.
that's a problem from the state.
Blending and braiding funding from other sources, and they just can't be counted on like the allowance. for
Right.
aid.
So this isn't necessarily as big of a gap as it might appear.
It may not be.
It may not be.
We started out with, assumptions without doing the calculation. What do we feel is a reasonable assumption moving forward for costs?
Right.
For example, the retirement system, under the present system, it goes wild with costs. We added an actual 2%, for example, to the retirement rate every year. Well, if fundamentally something happens with that program and that cost structure changes, it will impact the cost of the program. But we struggle getting a budget in the current year and predicting the following year, so it's hard to go out very far and really know. This really shows a trend.
Well, I've got a question if you have. 4-year-old preschool, isn't there reimbursement, $3,700 for 4-year-old preschool? 34. Sorry, the rabid preschool woman here.
If it's within
I tortured Joanne
That's
and
not
Brian
included
Camp
in here,
for
but
half a year
if it
about
were
this.
under a state-governed program, but that may or may not fit with what IB has in mind. But that is not included, any reambrsment for preschool here.
So you've not added that?
No,
Not
that
for
is
the
not
4-year-old
added in.
preschool.
So
Yeah.
it's-
That's what I wanted to
saying,
clarify.
that there are, that there may be other kinds
There may
of
be.
places to, okay.
The potential's there.
In terms of, how we, is 500, do we need that many to start? I mean, to get it going at this, because it's a pretty bigger, if it was a smaller number, I'm just.
Right,
Just-
no, I don't think, I think that's sort of what we thought. 4 classrooms was kind of our max, is
Okay.
what we were thinking, but, so I think we're mentally prepared to look at smaller numbers. We haven't run anything to say what is the minimum number that we need to make a program work. If it's one classroom, is it two classrooms, I don't know.
I think what you want to keep in mind is it becomes more complex when you get into what we would traditionally think of as middle school and high school, because these kids are scaffolding up. Now, they may come in, but you want to make sure you have enough to be able to run a high school schedule efficiently.
Now, are you thinking when you start out, phasing this in, preschool and on?
Pre-K through 5 to start, and then adding a grade at that point.
But if you started with only 2, then you're going to have a very small high school component, and that's a harder piece to fill in.
We do need to note also that transportation costs are not included in this total. It's just too difficult to come up with a number that's meaningful. It may be a high number, it may be a lower number. It depends on, you know, where all the kids are coming from and the effect that that has on the district's total transportation schedule. We're gonna have to throw all the numbers and locations into the optimization and run it again and see what the change in cost would be. So we just don't have enough information to give you a good number.
Presumably, we're already transporting them already, so.
If they're within our district, yes, that's true. So then it would be whatever the marginal shift is from changing the routes and the way that they would have to be optimized.
Of course, our hope would be that we also attract new students.
All of those have an impact on what the numbers look like.
We heard your concern, which you should be.
Well, you don't want to be a wet blanket, but
You should be.
on
That's
the
what
other
you're doing.
hand, you need to look realistically at what the potential costs are. And if you know that going into the project, then you can plan for it and develop the additional support and other partners, if possible, for a long-term commitment. Otherwise, it's not a program that Grand Rapids on its own could institute.
Oh, your numbers looked a lot better than Ken's numbers anyway, so you don't need to apologize.
Did you take this through Finance Committee this morning?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Any other questions on that?
Is it envisioned that this would be, $39 million is what we're gonna need to open this school next year? If that would be.
No, we haven't done that. We haven't
Right.
said what is the scale of the renovations that needs to happen, we haven't done a priority list of what needs to happen first.
Because you're
So-
looking at, for example, auditorium, new facility, that may not be the case.
Correct.
Maybe modification.
Yeah, maybe the renovation instead of the new.
Because one of the things that I'm looking at too is, as we go forward, as Superintendent Neal has suggested, as we go forward this year, we're also going to be looking at, hard to say if it's what buildings are going to be open, what we're going to do with the entire situation, closing schools, and maximizing the use of our high schools too, so.
We think this would be a great fit for that idea.
Suspect you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We actually talked about multi-use buildings.
Sure.
And we did invest in building to bring it up to a higher standard, that we could have multiple uses. The other thing is that we took our direction from the finance committee this morning, had to do with doing some further study to find out what would be the bottom line budget number that would be needed in order to open the building. We put together a budget that put together an ideal situation, kind of pie in the sky. It had a lot of bells and whistles, new windows, none. But we also know you don't have to have new windows to educate students. Our next step, as a part of the direction that they gave us, is to put together another budget to talk about, to speak more directly to what is essential for the opening of a program like this, that would not compromise the integrity of the program. We wanted to make sure that, as Dave shared with us, that the features that are important for raising the standard of educating our children are still there. We may not have the building in the shape that we'd like to see it the first year, but we certainly didn't want to compromise high academic standards and opportunities.
So you have the finance committee at this time has said to go forward and to develop a new budget, correct?
Great. That's great.
Did you want to go through your last question here before we move to the discussion? Thank you, Anna and David.
Thanks.
The last question had to do with potential policy and contractual implications. Question I didn't want, but I guess I'm here, so. Yep. And there are 4 areas. One is that we would seek out creative and non-traditional financial models. One of the things that Dr. Falk shared with us, it is a model of a school, I think, in Chicago, where they're using funding models. We have federal mandates that tell us how we pretty much have to spend our money, and we do so. So our question then becomes around how have other models allowed districts to fund innovation? It's a question that's bigger than our district. It's bigger than the state. It is a national debate as districts across the nation attempt to redefine how we educate students. Many of them find themselves asking the same kinds of questions because we don't want to have 50 kids in a classroom in one part of town and then 15 in another. So the question that we beg is then how do we fund innovation as we try to shift our paradigms around what is quality education? The other bullet had to do with staffing procedures, how we go about, how do we establish procedures that would allow the training that teachers receive to be in place over a period of time. How do we match teacher skills to the mandates of the job? And how do we create stable situations so that once teachers are trained and that they can remain in place and be impactful. The third bullet has to do with provision for a longer day. Our research going back as far as the 1960s and further would speak to the importance of time on task. We want to make sure that our day is extended in a way that, first of all, it would allow teachers the time that they deserve to collaborate, but also allow students and teachers the opportunity to learn deeply and in different ways, and thus the after-school programming, where we would embed the arts. We would also support students that are struggling, on and on. It is shaping the culture of the school. It is shaping our paradigm about what it takes to educate our students and do a good job. And then finally, we talk about the whole district ownership for the program. And I would even offer it is the whole community ownership of the program. We've been pulling in, holding conversations across the city because, as we said, this is bigger than Grand Rapids. It is an opportunity to be competitive nationwide and internationally. It is an opportunity to put in place a cutting edge concept and delivery of educating our students. It is about creating equity of access to high quality programming. So those are our 4 bullets in our summary. I'd like to also add that we talked about the 12-13 timeline that we're working with, and certainly that is what we'd like to adhere to. But I also want you to know that the district is very determined to give attention to details and to do a good job. Pull in the very best thinkers on and on. So if there is an adjusted timeline, we are, I'm saying this, but we are willing to do that so that we can ensure quality and we can ensure every feature of the program is doing what we expected it to do. Also, the numbers that you're working with, that has been, we put together a guesstimate. We knew that we would either have to figure up or calculate up or estimate down. But we had to start with a number that would allow us to begin to examine where we are in our thinking. Actually, some of the information that Susan is seeking from CRI, some of our census data, I think will be very telling in terms of where students are and where our populations are growing and the interests of the community, on and on. And that information will be extremely valuable along with the superintendent's overall plan, because this has to fit within her vision along with the board's vision. That kind of information is essential in coming up with a firm picture of where we're going in relationship to this concept.
Of course. Sorry, Mo. How do you feel, Ms. Evans, in regard to the stability piece? How can we sort of work through that? Has there been enough legislative changes in order to make sort of the stance more powerful, that somebody who is trained in IB can stay at a school where somebody may want to come in and take a spot?
I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure if I'm comfortable commenting publicly. I just think that creativity, a change in paradigm for everybody involved, so that we all have our minds around how we innovate on behalf of children, and we don't have intentional winners and losers. So I think that in order for us to innovate, you have to examine deep structures, just as you're suggesting. I think it is absolutely necessary. I don't have an answer, but I think we'll look at everyone's role through a different lens.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can, I mean, to some extent, that's on us to ask that we, when negotiations happen, we keep things at least flexible enough for these opportunities, so.
Yeah, it looks to me that our steps are new budget, contract issues, timeline, and obviously funding. And I think you made a good point, Mrs. Evans, on there's federal requirements involved. But districts used to working with those. Next steps, suggestions?
Well, yeah, whatever we need to do, I want to really encourage that we move forward with this, so.
Yeah, I think that's what we asked of this morning, was just permission to move it forward and to start having conversations around the funding piece and start those conversations, I think, and see where it goes.
I think what would be helpful, I'm not sure whether Finance Committee did a proposal or a motion or whatever, we could recommend to the full board a discussion to continue forward, if that's what would be required, to look into the finances and all. I mean, there's a number of things you've done, great work. I mean, this is huge from staff and from because it's wonderful. It's a wonderful concept. So I think if we, my suggestion, and help me with this if you think I'm wrong on that, I think if we suggested it go to the full board for agreement to go forward and pursue further financial.
Yeah, with our
funding
endorsement of the
and-
support of the, at least the academic ideas of the, yeah, absolutely.
Great.
I make a motion that we send this to the full board with our endorsement of the academic portion of the plan. Should we wait for Kenny to,
Yeah, sure. We'll wait for Kenny to come back.
so then we'll have to, maybe I can
We
come up
don't
with
have a
better words for
question
that.
Oh, no, that worked.
You like those words? Okay.
That was nice.
Carolyn, I know that you and your staff have worked really hard on this and have endorsed it strongly in terms of the ideas and the stuff. It's really impressive, so I'm really thankful that you're, doing that work, so.
And I was just going to thank you for mentioning them, because all of these people have been
Yeah.
meeting along with Claire and Dale over a period of time. And I think over the weeks, we've all gotten quite excited about the
Yeah.
concept.
So it's a wonderful concept. Certainly will
Yeah.
benefit
And I think some of the issues that were at City this fall, that whetted some of the administration's understanding of these nuanced contractual issues that we really need to look at and have that discussion and figure out how truly through nuts and bolts and words and contracts that we're going to get this done and where everyone feels that they're being appropriately compensated. Children are being taught appropriately and deeply, and that's the biggest concern. And Dr. Gonzalez, the AP at City, had just finished his PhD, and it was looking at, highly successful IB programs, AP programs, and then sort of low-performing IB programs and students, how they tier out, and then also generalizing information to the district to help push achievement in other areas. So I think that there's a lot of places we can keep pushing achievement, even if they're not at the IB program.
Well, the other thing I have to say about City, I was thinking about after school, and I don't know what programs at City are formal after-school programs, but what you have at City, I know you helped create it, Dale, is an incredible learning community where learning is happening after school, and a lot of it is not formal. It's just that there's kids and teachers and parents engaging and learning about stuff, and so it's really exciting and that's a community that was created as a result of the. So.
And those things are replicable. The other thing I think, and Monica and I have talked about this, is looking at what's going on in Chicago, where there's a very strong IB model, and how are they funding that? Their issues are the same, or probably larger than what we're facing here.
And IB itself has told us that we've been on the phone with their development office, that they want to be part of this fundraising conversation about how do they help with the expenses on their side of it. So I think that there's really some interest in seeing this model come to fruition from a lot of different ways.
So I'm excited that you're saying to move ahead. That's.
We wanted to wait for you, Kenny, but if you'd like to.
I got locked outside. No
Tony was making a motion, but we wanted.
I'll make it again. I'll make a motion that we send this discussion to the full board with our endorsement of the academic portion of the plan.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah, I didn't have my card on me. I forgot and stepped outside. The door said click. I'm like, oh boy. So I didn't pay attention.
Okay, anything else on this one?
About that.
All set?
Yeah.
Don't go far. No. Thank you very much, all of you, for all of your work
Thanks,
on
guys,
this.
for all
I
your
know the whole room was involved in this, and appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Have all of you met our new special ed person, Teresita Long?
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Teresita?
Hi, Teresita. Welcome back.
As you know, she's, I know her.
Yeah, of course you do. It's like, why ask that question? We all know that.
And she's wonderful. She's wonderful, so. Anything else for the good of the order? Got you out of here early.
Mr. Hemholt, I was hoping was going to start attending our meetings
He
to give
said
us
he did.
a legislative update.
He asked to be at our October meeting, so we will include him in our October meeting to give us a discussion on the legislative action or plan or whatever.
Okay. And do we need to have any discussion about policy, or?
But I think for this one, I think we wait till we go forward a little bit more. I would like a brief discussion, or you can just send me your ideas on what you would like to present at our next meetings of the Student Achievement Committee, so that we cover some issues that you're hearing or you're knowing about, or I know Dr. Randall here sends me, running list of items.
Yeah. Me too. She sends them to me.
She sends it to you. So we have a list, but
We can choose from that list.
we can choose from that list.
Well, I shared it with everyone, right? Wasn't I supposed to? I was hoping.
No, that's good.
And I thought perhaps nobody else was sharing with me, so.
I will get to you, Mrs. Evans, with ideas for our next. And do you have any suggestions for our next meeting? If there's anything pressing, maybe you would just want to get to me. Okay. And let me know what kind of issues are important for the district at this point to bring forward, as well as what the board wants. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
There you go.
That's beginning on time and ending on time is a very successful way of functioning.
There you go.
It means everybody